right, well, welcome everyone to the next session of Who Cares, Why Bother, which is a panel of esteemed guests here. I'm going to begin with a few general conference announcements. Number one, if you're here and your professor has asked you to verify your attendance, there's a table just outside the door where you can get a sticker on your bookmark if you have it with you. Also, the conference committee would like you to know that there's a raffle for some prizes, so make sure you stop at the table and sign up for that. And last but not least, if you need to exit, we know that everybody's got kind of a different class schedule. If you need to exit before the panel Q&A is completed, just make sure that you go to the farthest door and exit quietly so as not to disturb other participants. So my name is Mary Ann Lessert. I'm a faculty member in the English department. And I'm here, first of all, I want to thank our panelists who all are here to share with you what the role and the relationship between editors and writers is. And they all come from a slightly different perspective in terms of the types of writing they deal with and the types of publications they produce. So I'm going to briefly give you their names, and then we'll start them on their own kind of publication and editorial introduction. So first at the table is Carol Valade, and she is an editor, which I can't even imagine her role, of Gemini Publications, which is many publications that she'll tell you about. Next is Kiran Sud Patel, and Kiran is an editor for an online hyperlocal publication called The Rapidian. Next is John Winkleman, and John is an editor for Caffeinated Press and a local quarterly literary review called 3288 Review, named for the miles of Lake Michigan coastline. And last but not least, we have Sean Mackey, a faculty member in the GRCC English department who is also the student advisor, or the advisor, pardon me, for the student-run publication Display Magazine, a literary magazine that the college publishes. So let me get started with our questions. Basically, I'd like each of you, starting with Carol, if you could introduce your role as an editor and the type of publications you produce. So, Carol?
Sure. We publish, our oldest publication is Grand Rapids Magazine. It's a city life and style publication. All our publications are hyperlocal. We don't go really outside the West Michigan market at all. We are also locally owned. And unlike many city regional magazines across the country, if you get over to Detroit, Our Magazine, Chicago Magazine, most of those are owned by major publishing groups, and we are locally owned. The Grand Rapids Business Journal is second in our publication group, and that's, again, hyperlocal, super reporting journalism on business news. So it's business journalism, and most of those stories have a lot to do with money. The third publication, now 10 years old, is called Michigan Blue, and I think there were copies being distributed of the two magazines specifically, but Michigan Blue is statewide and looks at the life and style of Michigan residents, especially related to environmental aspects, the beauty of the state, people's interest in terms of outdoor living challenges and that type of thing. So we're going state to business to city regional city living, basically. BJ, Grand Rapids Business Journal, is supplemented with a separate publication that is online, grbj.com, and that is 24/7. We're doing a daily e-newsletter, and we're doing 7 e-newsletters specific to different types of businesses. So Pulse, P-U-L-S-E, is about healthcare manufacturing, healthcare centers, medical doctors, medical advancements in this area. influential women, women who are leading change in new businesses in this community, and commercial real estate development, RED, is probably one of our best read, because it's a lot about all of the new development in Grand Rapids, whether it's condos and apartments or new entertainment venues, and the number of things that you see sprouting up with cranes all over the city right now. So in addition to Grand Rapids Business Journal print, we also do grbj.com, which is exclusive story writing for that. Your turn, Kira.
Sure. I'm Kieran, as Marianne mentioned, and I am the managing editor of the Rapidian. The honestly best and coolest part about the Rapidian is that we are entirely powered by members of the community. So all of our work comes from citizens that live in this community, meaning any one of you potentially can write a story for us, and I know we'll get into that a little bit later. So the Rapidian is part of the Grand Rapids Community Media Center. You may have heard of WYCE 88.1 FM, GRTV, and Wealthy Theater. We are all part of the same umbrella organization. Specifically, as editor of the Rapidian, I'm responsible for working directly with our contributors and getting their stories ready for publication. We also feature photography. You'll see a photo of the day on our website every day. We do lists when appropriate. We do reviews, previews. All content directly comes from our community. So again, anyone from students to long-time writers can potentially contribute content depending on your ability to follow a few simple rules. We have a content requirement. Pieces have to be at least 400 words. All stories require photos, so we do need photos with photo credits. And if you're willing to meet those requirements and have your content be local and accurate, you can get your work published on the Rapidian.
Hi, I'm John Winkleman. I am the Chief Operations Officer for Caffeinated Press and also the Editor-in-Chief of the 3288 Review Literary Journal. We are a local publisher. We've been around for a little over a year, and we've had publications since August of 2015. Our primary editorial focus is finding and promoting talent from West Michigan, although we're pretty loose with what West Michigan actually means. At the moment, we're loosely defining it as everything between the border and the bridge and this side of US 127, although sometimes that's everything this side of Lake Huron or this side of the Atlantic. So it varies depending on what kind of talent we get submitting work to us. We have two primary streams for publishing. Caffeinated Press proper is where we do the long form. That would be novels, full collections of poetry, chapbooks, nonfiction history, children's literature, young adult literature, that kind of thing. Our literary journal is a quarterly, and that's where we publish our short form, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, essays, lyrical essays, photo collections, artwork, things like that. We've, in my role, Chief Operations Officer basically means that when we first got the company up and running, I was responsible for getting all of the infrastructure of the company in place. But now that we've got things kind of smoothed out and we've got a system in place, I'm more of backup and assistance for all the other roles at the publisher. As the editor-in-chief of the literary journal, I am the first person to receive any of the submissions we get, which at last count is roughly about 1,000 a year. And then I do the initial vetting to make sure that all the submissions, any submissions that come in, meet our submission guidelines. And then I sort them out to our different editors, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, to vet them and see if there's something we want to publish. And then I'm in charge of writing rejection letters. So if any of you have submitted something and got a rejection letter, that was for me. Sorry. Yeah, it's
Kudos.
just to draw the heat from the rest of my colleagues. Yeah, it's as a small publisher, everybody there wears many different hats. We kind of have to, but I think we've got our feet under us. We have a dozen long-form pieces in the pipeline to be published over the next 14 months. Here's a small stack afterwards if you want to come up and take a look at what we've done so far. This is it. And yeah, good to meet you all.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Mackey. I'm the faculty advisor for Display Magazine. And the cool thing is, if you go to GRCC, you can submit to Display Magazine to potentially get something published. As the faculty advisor, I'm not really the day-to-day editor on making the selections of what pieces get put in the get in the magazine every semester. Because it's student-run and student-led, fellow students, much like yourself, who've been in English 102, maybe they took a poetry class, they really got excited, did well in peer review and revision, probably all the stuff you hate to do in class right now. They really found it enlivening and liked it and gave great criticism. And those students kind of get singled out, and I asked them to basically see if they'd like to try their hand at editing. So my role at Display is much more creating editors than it is picking texts and making those final selections. Those are all done by fellow GRCC students. At Display Magazine, we publish anything that's submitted by a current GRCC student in poetry, fiction, nonfiction, any way you want to submit it, basically. The art department also has a faculty advisor, and they submit art publications or art pictures of either sculpture, painting, whatever those students produce in the art classes. Overseeing the writing portion is more than enough work to handle. We had last semester 58 poetry submissions. I believe there was 10 nonfiction submissions, and then I think 15 fiction submissions. So those are all coming from fellow students. We only have a few pages to really work with here. We're currently at about 32 pages. And so it really becomes the goal of working with editors to have them find texts that would work, that really show GRCC talent, which all of you have, that's why you're here, and really make it so we can hear a diversity of voices. Because of that, my role as faculty advisor, I'm really trying to see how we can take Display and make it more community focused. How can we get GRCC and all of your voices heard by a larger community than just those fellow students around here? We have gotten broadening our submissions from students who are taking classes, say, at Byron Center or at some of our high school courses, our remote locations down in Holland. So we are trying to get some voices there, but then we're also looking to how do we get, you know, Grand Rapids in general to hear more about all the great writing that you students are doing. And that's really where the role of the student editors come in. They are brainstorming ideas, coming up with different ways that we can make GRCC a more valuable part of the community than it already is. Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody for those introductions. I'm going to ask two questions that have to do with work and writers, so I just wanted to prepare you. So the first question I'll ask you will have to do with work. So the types of stories, the things that get you excited as an editor when you're reading. So if you think about that, think of those stories first. And the second question I'll ask you will go more toward writer behaviors, let's say, skills and tendencies of the writers themselves. So back to that first one, just wanted to give you that preface. What do you look for in the work you accept from writers? And as a kind of byline, what types of articles, stories, submissions excite you as an editor? So Carol, do you want to start there?
There are 10 answers to that one question and probably 20 for the next. First of all, the magazine group at Gemini Publications, 80%, 85% of the publication is written by people in the community. One way of reflecting Grand Rapids and telling you about the community or new things that are going on in the community or in the state of Michigan is to do that by using people who are local. we're focusing, we're mirroring the talent of this community in a community publication and providing that as sort of a guide to those who want to become involved. I want to say that right now, I think there's greater freedom for writers and people who are making community observations. There are better observations being made by writers. There's a new level of skill that I'm seeing now that I haven't maybe seen previously, maybe 10 years ago, where it was more practiced and formulated. The opportunity for expression right now, I think, is unequaled in the time that I've been editing publications or reporting or writing on my own. So a big part of what we do is community-based, and a big part of, the way we're reflecting the community is with your voices as writers. And that includes the business journal too, grbj.com, in terms of blogs and community opinions. The best writing skill is a good listener, a good observer. That is the best skill you can bring to paper and to the reader. By being able to listen well to what others are saying, to understand their meaning, and convey that to others who are interested in reading about that is the most important thing you can do. That's step number one. Not to be interruptive, but to be interrogatory in questions and framework, to be a good interviewer. To be a good observer is hugely important. I also do some work with NPR, WGVU, and with PBS stations, and on the radio they always say, well, you can't see what I'm talking about, so I need to describe it for you. In print, that's even more true. You're describing it. Sometimes the best story is one that sets the scene, that provides context for that person's story or that event that we're covering, or even if it's another crane going up. What's it like to ride in the crane and look down on the Grand Rapids skyline and see what's going on from up there? How do you describe that ascent? And God, the descent, that was really bad. Scary stuff. But that's the thing about writing, is that passion shows. Your passion for writing isn't necessarily about telling your story, it's your passion for words. It's your passion to use words succinctly, because none of us are going to be using a 1,000-word story. One of the mistakes people make coming into my office is saying, I'm a magazine writer. I want to write feature stories. I want to be on the magazine staff. I want to be a freelancer for the magazine. You understand the community first and write for the business journal. Understand, where those parts and pieces of the building blocks of the community are, so that you can better describe it. We're not paying as much for adjectives. I don't want to see a paragraph with 100 adjectives and 2 verbs. That's not descriptive. That doesn't provide the action of what you're trying to tell me. So part of that is the passion, and using verbs more often than adjectives might be opposite what you think, to set the scene and tell those stories. That might be a lot. There may be questions about that, but I'll let Kira go next.
All right, so Kieran, the writing that gets you excited, and then when you look inside the writer's skill, what do you see?
Sure. So one of the great things about what we do at the Rapidian, in addition to our online publication, is we host regular events out in the community. And the idea is that we go to you. So you may not have been ready to come to us and say you want to write, so we'll go out and host a workshop and hopefully get you excited. And I talk to a lot of people there who don't think of themselves as writers. They think of themselves as more of readers or observers of other content, but they're not ready to tell the story themselves. And I'll talk to them and ask them about their own passions, and echoing what Carol said, that's when I tap into what they should be writing about. So ask yourself, what is it that you're most passionate about? And you'll start to put the words down and you'll see just how strong and powerful they are. So the kind of submissions, to answer the question, that get me the most excited are ones that come directly from the writer's perspective, their area of expertise in some field that they care about the most. And it turns into a really deep story. We feature all types of content. That being said, you can write an opinion piece, you can write a review of a concert, you can write a profile of a speaker, you can cover the city council meeting. Those pieces require objectivity, and that can be difficult. I do deal with writers who are determined that their perspective is the truth, and it's their perspective, which they're entitled to, but I'll have to categorize that as an opinion piece rather than as a news piece. And I do hope we get into this a little bit later because that is important.
Underscored, yeah.
But if you want to do one or the other, that's perfectly fine. Just be clear that there is a difference. So determine what you want to do, work with me, and we can find a way for you to get that message out in the best way possible.
All right, thanks, Karen. John, the work that excites you when it comes across your desk, and maybe the kind of delving into the skills that writing possesses.
To put it simply, good stories well told. We get the stories, the submissions we receive, poetry, fiction, nonfiction, tend to be all over the board. It's the ones where the writer is obviously interested in what they're writing, the ones where the writer is speaking to somebody, not just talking to themselves, which is a particular thing we see quite a lot in poetry submissions, which is there's no way to connect with the piece submitted if the poet is talking to himself or herself. Be in a conversation with your reader. I realize that's kind of an opaque thing to say, but it's very important, because if the reader can't connect with what you're writing, then they're not going to want to read any more of what you've written. As far as the more technical details of what we look for, we do not accept first drafts of anything. And it's painfully obvious when it's a first draft, no matter how good it might be. So edit, and edit some more. Have somebody who is not a close friend or a partner or a family member read your stuff and give you honest and objective feedback on it. Listen to that, edit some more, and then send it in. One of our kind of unofficial guidelines is for any given piece, you're writing, this one submission, it may be 1 in 1,000. It may be superb 1 in 1,000. It's also 1 of 1,000. So if it's, if right out of the gate it's got problems, the editors and readers may not ever make it past first paragraph.
All right, thanks, John. And Sean, the work that I guess you see your editors, your student editors get excited about, and what you've heard them discuss and maybe delve into more deeply.
Sure. For the student editors and for myself working with them, the things I think that most resonate for them is writing that deals with topics, ideas, thoughts that are pertinent and very immediate to a college student. It may be dealing with gender inequality, it may be dealing with the diversity and race issues, and we're at a college where you may have a student who, grew up in a really small town, who had drive your tractor to work day, sitting right next to someone who, was at a school with, 80% different diversity besides their own. And those two cultures mix together, and they provide a lot of learning and growth. And so the students really look to writing that gives voice to that, that deals with that. Recently, some of the writing that's really resonated for the student editors are definitely gender related, dealing with politics of gender, inequality, sexual assault, and then also military life. Plenty of writers talking about their struggles fitting into civilian life after military service, or wrestling with, okay, I want to be a pacifist, and yet I do see some value in the military. And a demonstration of some sort of critical analysis that they're doing with what's going on in and around them. So that's what makes interesting writing for the student editors. For myself, as someone who studied poetry, I love reading the student poetry. I think it just does an amazing thing. And Ezra Pound, who's this old poet who you guys probably don't know, said a couple things. One, he said that poetry means to condense, right? That poetry is really life brought down to its bare essence, and you get rid of all the needless words and things like that. That's probably what you don't like about it too, is it gets it down to that essence. And he also said that poetry is news that stays news. And those two ideas, I think, if I can make a little bit of an apologetics for why poetry should matter, is that you are in a generation where you're taking information and data and news in smaller and smaller chunks. So even in the last 5 years, going from Facebook, where you could write a paragraph or two, to Twitter, and now we're just basically down to emojis. So it's almost like we've regressed back to the Egyptian times, and we're making hieroglyphics, like heartbroken, sad face. Okay, we get it. It didn't work out well. He's not that into you. And so we see all of this stuff, but poetry is that. Poetry is all of that stuff brought down to its barest essential. And for generation, millennials, I'm sorry, you're getting labeled as people who don't have a good attention span. Poetry is for you then, because it's shorter. So that's why it's so great to see so many students writing poetry, submitting it. It's by far our largest submission area. Even though if you were to go to Schuler's, you would see that the poetry section is about one shelf, and then everything else is fiction and mostly nonfiction, because that's what people are really interested in. The poetry still does something. That's why we get so many submissions. There's a human quality to it that we all kind of know and understand. And it's great to see it from fellow writers, fellow students.
All right, thanks, everyone. So I'm listening to some of the things that you're saying that I'm picking up on. So I'm going to divert from my original question about, and you can keep this in mind, this will come next, that writer or that publication or something that you still think of as your horror story as an editor, okay? But I want to go back to something first, and I'll address this to Kieran and Carol, since you both nearly did a fist pump or a high five at this one. But you were talking about opinion versus objectivity in writing. So anything that the two of you want to say about that, since you're taking in nonfiction predominantly?
Sure. I'll start with this, if you don't mind, Carol. As I was saying, a lot of people start to find success when they tap into their area of passion, and then they want to pursue this particular area. But the tricky part comes when the author's perspective shines through in a news piece. And a news piece, for example, would be coverage of what the city council did at their meeting on Monday night. Let's say they passed a few laws, put some new rules into effect, created a committee, handled their business. If you were to cover this meeting as a strict reporter, it would be critical that the audience who's reading your story doesn't know where you stand on the issues. And that is important because you as the reader can determine how you feel. if you are to put your own perspective in that piece, you are now trying to direct the reader to feel the way that you feel about the piece, and you've now crossed the line into a perspective piece rather than a news piece. Now, both are important, but a person must first know all of the issues before they determine how they want to feel about it. And I've run into issues with people, particularly writers that are really into a said ordinance or a said candidate, and they've eliminated room for the other perspective, and you can't really have a dialogue if you're not considering both points of view. So it can be interesting to talk to writers and read their work when they don't give room for the other side or perspective. So that's something I'm sure, Carol, you can talk a little bit more about too.
There is clearly an opinion page in each of our publications, and the rest of it is, again, the observation and the listening skill that the writer's bringing to the reader about whatever the subject matter is. Excuse me, I'm fighting a sinus infection too today. The reporting aspect, especially reflected in the Business Journal and often in the magazine, when we're getting into, you know, the riverfront development and putting the rapids back into the Grand River, and, you know, what is a snuff mussel, and you know, so those things need to be factually described for other people to have an understanding of what it is. And so it's just really important to take yourself out and to think about this. You know, if this is the kind of writing you want to do, then you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your community. And if you're doing it for your community, you want every segment of that community to understand what it means to them, you know, without doing it, you know, this one's for girls and this one's for boys, and, you know, this was so you're bringing, you know, you're staying away from any one perspective to bring the universe together in those observations, in terms of what you've heard, what you're trying to convey to them. They weren't able to go to that meeting. They didn't get to see that. They didn't ride the crane, you know, to the top of the city. So tell them about that in a way that affects each one of them. And we, you know, I say that even though the Business Journal is obviously a very, very niche publication. It's very, very specific to business professionals, young entrepreneurs, and CEOs. So, you know, the perspective of the writer then, or to the reporter, is to bring, you know, what does that mean to the business community? How does that make you compete better with your new product for boxed water or cider juice or beer? And you're not, you know, it's not what you think of the beer. We're not asking you for a taste test. We're asking you to provide the information to others so that they have good information to use to make choices in their lives and understand an issue or a venue better. Dining reviews are probably the most subjective thing that we do in Grand Rapids Magazine. These are totally anonymous. Nobody gets paid except for the, you know, the writing part of it. And to be able to move yourself away from, you know, I like, if it doesn't have sriracha sauce on it, I'm not going to like it, to, if it has sriracha sauce, maybe somebody's going to like it, and this is, you know, how bad it was or how good it was, you know, in terms of the taste levels. Those are the kinds of things that, you know, even when it can be somewhat subjective, you're still pulling yourself away because it's not about what you thought, unless you're specifically asked, what did you think? And then it's going to be a comment piece. It might be a blog in one of the publications. It might be a short burst on the website. But generally speaking, you're informing someone else when you are contracted to do something for one of our publications.
All right, thank you.
Add one quick thing. I don't want to discourage anyone from thinking that that doesn't mean we don't want detail in news pieces, because there is absolutely still room for your description of what's happening, and that can help someone, again, feel as though they're there. So we absolutely appreciate detailed observations, and that can be done in a way that doesn't immediately give away your stance on the issue.
Right, thank you. We all have had writing instructors or mentors or editors that have, certain margin comments or things they say. And an instructor of mine who was really gruff in his comments always used to call this part, "get out of the way." He would just say, "get out of the way." Put those people and what they're saying on the page. Don't give me an adjective or an adverb that slants it from your perspective. Get out of the way. So it's just kind of fun. So
Pretty succinct. I'll use that.
yeah, do you use it? Good. All right. Yeah, get out of the way. Get yourself off the page. So when you're dealing with creative writing, I also heard a couple of things. And Sean, you can feel like you want to go further with this, but something that Sean mentioned was this idea of, even creative writing becomes a mirror of our society, our social consciousness, the trends and things that are going on. But within that, John, you mentioned something in as far as writing for yourself. So maybe if you could distinguish that. We always hear, especially creatively and about our passions, write what you know. And that's absolutely true. But there is writing, I guess, that even in the creative world could be said, you could say to somebody, get out of the way, right? So talk more a little bit about that, about when you said when the poet is writing to themselves.
Okay. Well, it's, all storytelling is telling a story. It's a continuum from the speaker to the listener, or from the writer to the reader. And if you're assuming, if you write as if you're your only reader, that really comes across. There's no entry point to where a reader can say, I get that. I've had that experience. That resonates with me. You don't want to write as if it's like an inside joke, something that only you will get. And that's a difficult thing to do, especially for beginning writers, because if you're a beginning writer, you've had no practice. You don't know the rules of writing yet. You may know the grammar, you may have the vocabulary, but those are the scaffolding for telling a story or writing a poem or writing an essay. And if you know all those rules but you don't really have anything to say, you're just talking to yourself, it comes across. I don't know if that makes sense, if you've had experiences with that. The idea of getting out of the way ties into that. Is it me telling a story, or is a story being told through me? Is it my story, or is it everybody's story? Is it something that I'm channeling, or something that I'm creating on the spot? Is it something that is just a random group of words that I'm trying to arrange in a way that people will find interesting? Or is it something that is deeply meaningful to me and I'm trying to convey the meaning to my readers?
All right, thank you. Sean?
Yeah, so talking about writing for yourself versus writing for an audience, there are two things that separate humans from the rest of the animal kingdom. One, we get these cool opposable thumbs so you can send text in the middle of the night. And the other thing is that we have these gigantic brains that allow us to communicate with another human being abstract concepts about life and the world. That's it. Otherwise, we're not much different than anybody else or anything else. But having that ability to share is just an innate part of being a human being. So writing is just another element or another medium in which you're sharing that communication. And we start as an oral culture, as a species, we share information with each other like, hey, don't eat that berry, you'll die, or that mushroom if you want to have a good weekend, or whatever. Like we give you all this information in order to help each other live a better life or survive. And once we take that from an oral tradition and start putting it on the printed page, still the same rules apply. We are trying to make our community, our tribe, our planet better. We're trying to help this species do a better job with wrestling with all of those things. So yes, you can write for yourself, but the act of writing requires that there's an audience. And otherwise, it's just should stay in your head, right? If it's an audience of one, it's good enough in your head. That's what daydreaming does and all of that. The act of putting it on paper now creates this relationship. And that's the great thing, I think, about being an editor, is that an editor is in relationship with the writer. And the reader is going to be in relationship with the writer as well. And they get together, they go on a date when a reader reads that text, whatever that may be, an essay for your English 102 class, a poem, a love letter to someone that you really like, or an email asking for a job. You are now creating a relationship between you, the writer, and the reader. And that's just part of communicating, and it's really important. There was an author, her name's Jamaica Kincaid, and she's this phenomenal author and poet and politically active, and she swears she only writes for herself. And yet, all of her writing ends up dealing with social issues, race, post-colonialism, world monetary, inequities and distribution. And I'm sorry, she can say that till she's blue in the face. She's still trying to communicate with another human being. And I know most of my students talk about not really liking to read novels or poetry, especially poetry. They just want to read nonfiction because that's where the truth lies. And I would just like to encourage you to see that we can sometimes get more to the heart of truth. We can get more to the art of being a human through fiction and through poetry, because it allows us the ability to not be objective. It allows us the ability to be totally on the page and say, this is my life, this is what's good about it, this is what sucks. Do you have a similar situation? Hey, here's how I dealt with it. And when we do that in fiction, we can see a character wrestle with it. And we can have a writer take that character down one road where it turns out great, or take a character down another road and it doesn't go so well, hopefully trying to save us the hardship, right? If we say, hey, if someone who's got a little too much braggadocio and maybe thinks of themselves as a god, it doesn't turn out well. Thank you, Icarus, right? So we can start with that, but we can see that replayed over and over again. And fiction is really this chance to see how we can communicate in our most abstract ways, because here we're not dealing with actual tangible facts. We're dealing with characters, inventions, settings, worlds that we have totally created, but by that we get to the heart of truth even more so.
All right, so lots of you have heard about TED Talks, 10-minute snippets of expertise. We're going to take that down to about maybe 10, 20 seconds. We got a last couple of minutes. Is there anything we haven't touched upon that you just briefly want to say?
Deadlines.
Yeah. Say that again, Carol.
Deadlines. There's a deadline for everything in publishing and in writing. And if it's not here at that time, we're going without you. And that is where the discipline comes in. You have to stop rewriting the story. You have to stop researching. There isn't one more interview. We're dead. We're at the deadline, and we're going. So back it up from there so that you teach yourself to have this done and that interview or that discussion or this part of the story finished, in sequences, so that you don't hit the wall on the day that it's due, and then you want to tell me your cat died. It's, if we've contracted with you to bring this piece in and to make those observations and to tell the story for this community or to this community, then you have to make the deadline, and that's the most brutal piece of writing.
Right.
It has to end.
Thank you. Karen?
Sure. I say simply observe. I told this to our intern who is currently with us, who was looking for story ideas. She walks to work every day, and I told her simply, look around at what you see every day on your walk in and start to pay attention to surroundings that you otherwise may consider trivial or simply part of this everyday walk. Because the news is happening out there in the community. It is not happening in our office where I sit during the day. It's out at the restaurants, out at the coffee shops, at the library, everywhere else in the community, except right there, right in front of you. So go find it, start observing, and you'll come up with some incredible story ideas.
All right, thanks. John?
Read the submission guidelines, follow them. If this thing that you wrote doesn't match up with the submission guidelines, then that is probably not the venue to which you should be submitting. There are thousands, literally thousands of publishers in this country alone. You know, if what you're writing is kind of a fit, but not a great fit, then maybe find a publisher that is a great fit. So research where you're trying to get published. Maybe if it's a magazine, buy an issue, look at the website. But above all, and the beginning and end of all, is read the submission guidelines before you submit.
Great. Sean, 10 seconds.
Okay. You know, when I was 18, 19 and in college, I thought I wouldn't really be able to write anything until I had done X, Y, and Z. I'd traveled the world. I had lived a bunch of places. I'd been kicked out of a bar for having a bar fight. I got a tattoo, whatever. I just felt like I needed to do something with my life in order to be able to write about. Now having done some of those, not get kicked out of a bar, but now having done some of those things, I can tell you, you don't. You're coming, what you have today, the experiences you've had, even if you were to just say, oh, I haven't really done anything, I just lived in my small town and now here I am, you have more than enough to write about for the rest of your life. You could, you know, put yourself in a little cave and you would have enough ideas and subject matter to be set. So with that, I just want to encourage you to put pen to paper, put fingers on a keyboard, and start communicating with your other human beings and help make us all better.
All right, thank you. I know we're, running the cusp of our deadline for time, but if anybody has any questions, a couple of things we can do, ask them right now, or feel free to approach any of our panelists. They've been very generous with our time, so thank you. Any questions out there? All right. Well, like I said, feel free to approach, and let's thank our panelists for their time. Thank you.
Thank you.